Serafina Cole had learned very early in life that being invisible was the safest thing she could be. She did not draw attention to herself. She did not raise her voice. She did not ask for things she knew would never come. She moved through her days quietly, like a shadow that had taught itself to take up less space than even shadows normally do. In the small, cold settlement of Greymore, where wolf shifter packs ruled every piece of land and every piece of a person's worth was measured by bloodline and rank, a girl like Serafina was at the very bottom of everything. Half human, half Omega wolf, the kind of combination that made people look away, not out of shame, but out of simple disinterest. She was not worth looking at. That was what they had always told her, in words and in silence both. Her father, Marcus Cole, was not a bad man by nature. He had simply become one through years of poor choices and borrowed money, and the particular kind of sadness that settles into a man's bones when he has lost too much too fast. He drank more than he slept, he owed more than he owned. And on the morning that two very quiet, very polished men arrived at their door before the sun had fully risen, Serafina understood, without anyone saying a single word, that her father's debts had finally come to collect something he could not replace. She was given 1 hour to pack what she could carry. She took 3 dresses, a worn book on the history of the old packs, and a small photograph of her mother, a woman she barely remembered, who had died when Serafina was 4 years old, and had left behind almost nothing except a quiet kind of grace that her daughter had somehow inherited without knowing it. Marcus stood in the doorway of their home as the carriage pulled away. He did not wave. He did not call after her. He simply stood there, hollow and shrinking, and Serafina did not look back at him for very long. She allowed herself 10 tears. That was all. Then she straightened her back, folded her hands in her lap, and decided that whatever came next, she would face it with her chin up. It was the only thing she had ever truly owned, that quiet, stubborn refusal to be completely broken. King Dorian Blackthorn was a name that had a weight to it. Even in Greymore, far from the center of his power, people said it carefully, the way they said the word storm, when dark clouds were already on the horizon. He ruled over 7 wolf packs across a vast and ancient territory, and he had done so since the age of 21, when war and tragedy had placed a crown on his head that he had never asked for. 11 years of rule had made him exceptional and unreachable in equal measure. His commanders respected him, his enemies feared him, his court moved around him the way water moves around a stone, never quite touching the center of him. He had purchased Serafina the way one purchases a piece of land to settle a claim. There was no feeling in it. She was a transaction, a line in a debt ledger finally closed. He had not even looked up from his war maps when his men brought her before him in the council chamber. When he did glance at her, his expression held nothing in particular. He assigned her to the household staff, turned back to his maps, and thought nothing more of it. Except that something happened in that room that Dorian did not have a name for. As Serafina turned to leave, a tremor moved through him, not of the body, but of something much deeper. Something that had been completely still inside him for 11 long years lifted its head. His wolf, that ancient, powerful part of him that had gone silent the day he lost someone he loved, made a sound that was not a growl and not a word, but something closer to recognition, like a person who has been looking for a face in a crowd for years and has finally, unexpectedly, found it. Dorian dismissed the room. He stood alone for a long time after everyone had gone. Then he picked up his wineglass and set it down without drinking. He would not allow this. He refused to allow this. The court received Serafina the way courts always receive those they consider beneath them, with small cruelties wrapped in polite language. She was given the worst quarters in the servant wing. The other staff looked through her. Lady Mira Ashford, the king's high-born cousin, who had spent years quietly placing herself as the obvious choice for queen, made cutting remarks whenever Serafina was near. Always with a smile, always in front of witnesses, always in a way that sounded like concern, rather than what it actually was. Serafina endured it all without flinching. She worked harder than anyone asked her to. She learned the layout of Blackthorn Keep within 3 days. She was always early, always thorough, always composed. And when Lady Mira made a particularly pointed comment at a court gathering, something about the smell of debt following some people wherever they went, Serafina looked at her directly, calmly, and said, I was brought here to settle a debt, my lady. But I have never, not once, been for sale. The room went very quiet. Mira's smile did not waver, but something behind her eyes changed. On the upper balcony, half hidden in shadow, Dorian had been watching. He said nothing. He returned to his chambers. But the image of her, standing straight, unafraid, speaking the truth without raising her voice, stayed with him in a way he could not easily push aside. It began with coincidences, or what he told himself were coincidences. He found himself in the library at odd hours. She was always there, after her duties were finished, reading by the light of a single lamp in the far corner. Books on pack history, the books on the stars, books that had no practical use for a household servant, but that she read with the quiet focus of someone who genuinely needed to understand the world she had been placed into. He did not stop her. He started making sure a better lamp was lit near that corner, though he never said why. The first time they had a real conversation, it was past 2 in the morning. She had come to return a misfiled document. He was at the desk, which he sometimes was when sleep would not come. Neither of them explained themselves. They simply existed in the same room. After a while, she mentioned that she had read something in one of his history texts that she thought was factually wrong. He put down his pen and asked her why. She told him. She was right. It became a habit that neither of them named. Conversations in the library, late at night, about books and history and the stars and nothing in particular. She spoke to him the way no one in his court ever did, without management, without strategy, without the careful performance of saying what a king wants to hear. She simply said what she thought. When she disagreed with him, she said so. When she did not know something, she admitted it. It was so unusual that at first he kept waiting for the angle, the thing she wanted, the reason she was being honest. But there was no angle. She simply was what she appeared to be. Then came the evening that changed everything. Elder Lyra, the oldest and most respected seer in Blackthorn Keep, requested a private meeting with Seraphina. This was unusual enough that Seraphina almost thought it was a mistake. But the elder was waiting for her in a small sealed room, with the patient expression of someone who has been carrying a piece of information for a very long time, and has finally found the right person to give it to. What Lyra told her was this. Seraphina's mother had not been a disgraced human woman. She had been a descendant of the first queens, the ancient women who had ruled alongside the original Alpha Kings before the packs split apart and those bloodlines were scattered and hidden for safety. Seraphina's mother had concealed her identity her entire life, knowing that a first queen bloodline, in the wrong hands or the wrong time, meant captivity or worse. She had hidden it so completely that even Seraphina's father had never known the truth. And the first queen bloodline, Lyra explained, was the only true fated match for Alpha Kings of the Blackthorn line. It was written into the very roots of their kind. Older than any law, older than any pack boundary. Seraphina had not been brought to Dorian's court by accident, or by debt. Something much older than either of them had been guiding that path all along. Seraphina sat with this for a long time after Lyra left. She was not a person who believed that destiny excused the choices people made. She was also not the kind of person who dismissed the weight of what she had just been told. That night, she went to the library. Dorian was there. She sat across from him and told him everything the elder had said, directly, plainly, without drama. She told him she was not saying it to change anything between them. She was not asking for a title or a position. She simply thought he had the right to know. He went very still when she finished. Then, without a word, he stood and left the room. The distance he put between them over the following days was deliberate and complete. He reassigned her to the outer quarters of the keep. He increased his court duties until there was no hour that was not spoken for. He had done this before, buried something real under the weight of work and responsibility. He had done it 11 years ago, after Alara died. The woman his wolf had first recognized. The woman who had been taken from him not by illness or old age, but by an enemy's plan that had been meant for him and had found her instead. He had survived that. He could survive this. It was Rael who finally said the thing that needed saying. His beta, his oldest friend, who sat across from him one night when the keep was quiet, and spoke without softening a single word. You are not afraid of being wrong about her. You are afraid of being right about her, and then losing her the same way you lost the last one. But Dorian, you are already losing her. And you have not even tried." Dorian said nothing for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. "I buried a queen once," he said. "I am not sure I survived it the first time." Rael looked at him steadily. "Then perhaps," he said, "it is time to find out what surviving looks like when you do not walk away first." Lady Mira, meanwhile, had been watching all of this with the patience of someone who has invested too much to lose quietly. She went to Serafina with a private offer: gold, safe passage out of the kingdom, and a new life somewhere far away. She presented it as concern. She framed it as kindness. Serafina listened to every word. Then she said, "I will not leave because someone is afraid of what I represent. I left my last home because I had no choice in the matter. I do not intend to do that again." Mira's patience ran out. She planted a story, carefully constructed, built from half-truths and whispered suggestions, that Serafina was not a servant girl at all, but a spy, planted by a rival pack to manipulate the king. The accusation spread through the court quickly, the way all damaging stories do when they are well crafted and delivered to the right ears at the right time. By the morning of the council session, it had reached the senior nobles, and they were calling for Serafina's removal from the keep. Serafina was brought to stand before the council. She did not fidget. She did not ask for sympathy. She stood with her hands at her sides and her chin level, and she looked at the room with the steady, calm expression of someone who has already been through the worst and is not afraid of it happening again. She had decided, somewhere in the walk from the outer quarters to this chamber, that she would not perform innocence for people who had already decided what they believed. She would simply be what she was, and let that speak for itself. Dorian stood. The chamber went silent so fast it was almost physical. He did not look at the council when he spoke. He looked at Serafina, and in that look, in the way he held it, steady and without apology, something in the room shifted before he had said a single word. He told the council that the evidence was manufactured. He told them that he had begun an investigation the moment the accusation surfaced, not because she had asked him to, but because he had realized, quietly, in the middle of the night, in a library with a lamp burning in the corner, that he could not imagine a version of this story where he did not. Mira was stripped of her court position. The council was dismissed. When the chamber finally emptied, Dorian and Serafina stood alone in the large, still room. He crossed the space between them slowly, not with urgency, not with drama, but with the careful deliberateness of a man who has thought very hard about each step and is choosing to take them anyway. "I purchased you to settle a debt," he said, "and I have thought about that every day since you arrived. I cannot undo what your father did, or what I allowed to happen by accepting it, but I would like—" He stopped, started again. He was not a man accustomed to asking for things. "I would like to spend the rest of my life making that right, if you are willing to allow it." Serafina looked at him for a long moment. She did not soften it. She was not the kind of woman who made things easy simply to avoid discomfort. "I will not stand beside you because a wolf decided it," she said, "and I will not stand beside you because of something written down before either of us was born. If I am ever beside you, it will be because you earned that place, and because I chose it." He held her gaze. "Then let me earn it," he said simply. What followed was not a fairy tale. It was slower and more honest than that. He was not practiced at being open, and she was not practiced at being received. He took her to places in the keep that he had never shown anyone. The old observatory on the North Tower, where his father had taught him to read star maps. The war records room where the history of every pack was stored in handwritten volumes. The garden that had been locked since Elara died, and that he unlocked one evening, without making an announcement about it. He told her about Elara, the way a person tells the truth about a wound, not to draw sympathy, but because pretending it did not exist had never actually helped. Serafina listened without trying to fix anything. She understood, in a deep and quiet way, that some grief does not need to be solved. It just needs to be witnessed. In return, she let herself be known, fully, for the first time. She told him about the 10 tears she had allowed herself in the carriage, about the way she had spent years making herself smaller so that the people around her would feel comfortable, about the photograph of her mother that she had carried across the territory in a coat pocket, the only piece of a person she had never really known. He listened to all of it with the same attention he gave to his maps and his strategies, as if understanding her were something worth doing carefully. The night of the bond came without ceremony. They were in the library, as they always ended up being, eventually. He reached across the table and took her hand. She looked at it for a moment, then looked at him, and she let him hold it. His wolf settled into a stillness it had not known in 11 years. Something deep in her blood, old and royal and long hidden, answered that stillness with warmth. Not magic exactly, but something that felt like recognition. Like coming home to a place you have never been, but somehow always knew existed. The announcement reached the court the following morning. For the first time in 11 years, the words Queen of Blackthorn were spoken without grief, following behind them like a shadow. The court received the news in different ways, some with genuine joy, some with surprise, and a few with the careful rearranging of expressions that comes when people realize the world has reorganized itself without asking their permission. Seraphina stood at Dorian's side that morning in the great hall of Blackthorn Keep, dressed simply, her back straight and her expression steady. She did not look like someone who had been handed a crown. She looked like someone who had walked a very long road and had arrived somewhere that, for the first time, felt like the right destination. She thought, briefly, of a carriage moving through dark trees, of 10 tears and a folded photograph, of a girl who had decided, in a moment of quiet grief, that whatever came next, she would face it standing. She had been sold into this place, but she had never, not for a single day, belonged to it. She had chosen it, and that made all the difference in the world.